A lot of people ask about on these cameras, does it meet OOOOa, OOOOc, and now Appendix K minimum detection and visualization capability? And the answer is absolutely yes. We use third parties to verify that. OOOOa, it was originally 60 grams per hour. It was a 50-50 mixture between methane and propane. And so that equates to about 10,000 ppm. The new regulations now broke it up. The EPA decided to actually focus on individual gases. And the three control gases they use is methane, and that is at 19 grams per hour. For propane, it's 22 grams per hour. And for butane, it's 29 grams per hour. There's still many other gases that the OGI cameras, they can visualize. As I said, there's 19 other ones that this one does. Cameras do not speciate the gas. They all essentially look the same. But every customer, when they're doing optical gas imaging, even in the downstream in a refinery or petrochemical plant, they know what gases are flowing through their system in which unit. So they know if there's a leak in this area, it is probably, this gas, and most of the time it's indicated right on the piping or something like that. In Appendix K, they're actually calling out now that that either the end user, the operator, the manufacturer, like us, or service companies, they would like for people to now establish what is called the operating index and the operating envelope of when you're using an OGI camera, especially if you're going to use it as the alternate work system to method 21 of using snippers. You actually have to validate how you're doing that. And so what that kind of looks like is something like this. So when we went through our most recent testing to validate for Appendix K, we decided to follow what the EPA was doing and kind of show people what this might look like. I think we're the very first company in the United States to do this. And so what we did is we established these characteristics of OGI performance audits, necessary supplies, site facility inspections, record keeping, and field conditions. So what we did, and nobody's ever done this that I know of before, because everybody asks you this, but nobody has the information. We kind of now have it. So what we did is we established these test parameters, this operating envelope test parameters, when we validated that our camera can meet the minimum detection for LDAR inspections. Now remember, this is for LDAR inspections. Many companies are not doing the testing to this level. Many companies are just still today find the leak and fix the leak. And they are not trying to actually measure how small or necessarily how big it is. What they're really trying to do is find them and fix them and reduce them, right? Because if they are, an auditor comes in from the State Air Quality Board or from the EPA and finds that leak before you find it, that is when they can fine you. And they start the fine, as probably everybody in here knows, they start the fine from the last time they did their inspection. So if that was a year ago, that starts from a year ago to this point in time. They assume it's been leaking that entire time. And that's why the operators get these fines of hundreds of thousands, if not, a few $1 million. And then everybody has to sit around the table and negotiate, what they're actually going to pay. So in this particular case, what we did is we just said, okay, to find these minimum leaks, we're going to establish and do our testing under these conditions. So we picked wind speeds from 0 to 10 meters per second. So that's up to about 17 miles per hour. Distances from 0 to 25 meters. So that's about 75 feet. Delta T's from 0 to 15 degrees centigrade. We tried the 2 different lenses. We used different operating camera modes and then using digital zoom. Okay. So all of these things can have an effect on how far and how small of a leak that you can see. And so on any given day, one of the easiest and fastest things that we've always done is you can buy these little portagas cylinders. When it was quad OA, it was a mixture of the methane and propane. It was actually calibrated and it had a regulator at 60 grams per hour. You could get a dual one, which would take it down to 6 grams per hour. You set that bottle out there and you start at 10 feet away and you just walk backwards until you can no longer see the gas leak. And on that given day, that means under those climatic conditions of wind, right? Overcast, sunny, it could be snowing, sleeting, whatever it is that you're operating that particular day, that establishes what your operating envelope is. But nobody ever really wrote that down or did anything. They just used that as the test. Now the EPA and your air quality boards are asking people to define this so that they know that when the operator goes out to do an LDAR inspection, they know what the limitations of their product is. And this goes for aerial, goes for handheld, it goes for fixed mounted continuous monitoring, whatever OGI camera, and whatever application. If it's on a robot, any of those things, you have to establish how and when you're going to be able to use that camera and successfully, if needed, you would be able to find a 22 gram per hour methane leak. That's the whole purpose of it. So then what we did in our testing, just a real quick snapshot, we created a whole bunch of videos. We sent it out to a bunch of different senior operators, and they had to basically grade the observability of the leak and the probability of detection. And so that's what we did to establish, again, what we call an observability and probability of detection index, and which means from a senior operator to a junior operator, how likely it is that all of these people agree at being able to see the leak, right? And then what we did is we created hundreds of graphs and plots about changing the distance, the wind speed, and the delta T. And the end result of that came out exactly kind of what we thought it was going to be. The general trends that we found, as the temperature differential increases, the observability increases, just what I said earlier, right? As wind speed increases, the observability decreases because it disperses the gas, right? And as distance increases, observability decreases. But you can correct for these kinds of things because you can use longer, narrower field of view or more telephoto optics. So if you're just using the one control, meaning like a 25 millimeter, these rules, would exist at some degree, but you can always affect these by some of the things that you can change by the modes that you operate the camera in. And that's what we show here. This is where we use the standard AGC mode. That's what the image looked like. Klahi, notice the same image, but in Klahi, it looks a lot better because there's more contrast and edge adjustment. And then when you use the GEM mode, the gas enhancement mode, it's even more visible. And what we found is the GEM mode, in many cases, in some cases, allowed us to visualize that same leak twice as far as it would if there was no GEM mode on. So very, very interesting findings that kind of came out of that we kind of knew, but we never had it down on paper. And so this is now a pretty extensive document. So with that is all I had. Does anybody have any questions? And then I think we'll do a little demo.